I'm Marian Ann Montgomery, the curator of Clothing and Textiles at the Museum of Texas Tech University. We are going to show you our objects that we would normally have shown in our Come and See in March of 2020 in advance of the exhibit Needlework and Needlework Tools called Sumptuous Stitches and Tiny Treasures. We're doing this online today because of the issues around being together, and it's a little weird not having all of you in your seats here in the auditorium, but I hope that you'll enjoy seeing these details up close and personal. I hope that you're all staying safe, and I want to start now, first of all, with the needlework pieces. I'm only going to show you a few of these because really the purpose of today is to show you how all of the tools work, but there are a few pieces that need a little bit of attention, I think, and up close is going to be kind of fun. So please bear with us. This is the first time we've done an online video, and we'll be cutting in and out, and I hope that you'll enjoy what you get to see. This first piece that we're going to look at this morning is a piece of stump work, and it is from the time of James I of England. He's the gentleman that had the Bible translated, and what it was probably some sort of cushion. It was taken out of that environment and then put into a frame. We've unframed it to get it away from acidic materials, and you can see these wonderful people that are here in the piece. The stump work is the raised work, so it is the berries, some of the other pieces that are on here. It's called stump work because of the raising that's underneath it. When we were sitting just to get ready to get started, I just realized that there's a little creature here. Maybe it's a dog, and I just noticed that it has some beady eyes there, which I hadn't noticed ever before. And here's another animal with some beadwork on it. So this is a beautiful piece that I'll look forward to sharing with you when the exhibit opens. Moving on, I want to show you this this piece of Berlin work. We've put all of the pieces that you're seeing in the acid-free material as a way to protect them and keep light off of them. This is a piece that was done in the 19th century. It's a piece of Berlin work. So it's wool work in here, and they had figured out by making the canvas smaller, you get sort of a they call it petty point. It's a smaller canvas. You use thinner threads, and you can get much more detail, as you can see, in the head and in the face. This piece, at first we called it a shepherd's piece, but now we think that it's really more of a statement about a wealthy man being out in the countryside, able to enjoy time with his pet rabbit, rather than, so he's a man of luxury, as you might guess from the ruffles on his shirt, and maybe the head piece that he has on. Kind of an interesting statement about society at the time. And then another piece that we wanted to show you is this Berlin work teapot holder. It's been mounted in a frame, and you would set it on the table to hold the teapot. Now there was some question about this piece because there's all this wool, and what would happen if you put something hot on it. Well, actually, I'm hoping that we can get in close and show you that these little white beads, and actually some of the gray ones too, are ceramic. We're getting in and showing that? Great. And so the ceramic bead sits above the wool thread, and that is what the hot piece would have sat on. And so it's kind of ingenious, and unless someone points it out to you, it's not so easily visible in the case. That's why I pulled these 3 or 4 pieces to show you. Now the last piece of needlework that I want to show you on this session is this piece, which comes to us from Scotland, and I've had a marvelous opportunity to be back and forth with the people in Scotland. I plugged in the Kincardy information down there on the bottom, and up popped this wonderful historical group in Scotland who showed me, sent me to some links where I was able to find the street address of this needlework school where Margaret Thompson did her piece, and also learned something about Viscountess Keith. And you're going to see on the screen images of the schoolgirls at the time that this piece was made. Now we know that they were taught writing, and they were taught reading and arithmetic. And we also know that this school served as a prep school for a young lady who then went on to go to teacher training in Edinburgh. So it's very unusual to know this much about a schoolgirl situation where schoolgirl needlework was done, and even more rare to have images of it, because this is a piece from the end of the 19th century, so of course photography was available, whereas most of the early pieces done in America were done before the 1830s, before the time that we all decided to teach girls the same way we taught boys, and therefore the needlework skills fell off and it wasn't taught as much. But here in this place in Scotland, they had continued at Viscountess Keith's school. We're moving on now to the needlework toolboxes, which were wonderful little treasures that you could take with you when you traveled or when you went to your friend's house. So many of the needlework tools that we're going to see today that were made in the 18th and 19th centuries were really intended for women to take with them when they went socializing and stitching with their friends and visiting. And for that reason, they were absolutely glamorous and gorgeous. This first one is called the Palais Royale French needlework box, and it dates from about 1800. So at the time this was made, Marie Antoinette had already lost her head. George Washington might have still been alive, but certainly Adams and Jefferson were still around. Nevertheless, that gives you an idea of how old this piece is. It does come from France, and it is fitted inside this burled wood with this wonderful little satin cover, a lovely mirror here, and then incredible needlework tools. These are mother of pearl thread winders, because you wanted your thread to be wound on this because it came in a big skein. Not only is there a thread winder here, but it also, underneath where the thread winder sat, was a little mirror to make it look even more glamorous. There's a thimble here, probably a little perfume box here. This is, I think, a needle case, a little bodkin here, or ribbon threader. You can probably see the little slit right there, and that was for threading your ribbons through your corsets and other intimate garments. This guy has shifted off. Look at the wonderful mother of pearl handles on these scissors, and a stiletto here. And then this whole top piece that is mirrored. Mirrors were very expensive at the time, not like we have them today, but very expensive at that time. This top pulls out, and underneath is revealed a little music box, and then there was a key that came with it, and obviously a little space to store some treasures. But if you had footmen to help you carry it all about, it didn't really matter. This one has initials on the top of it, TF. And it has a lot of interesting things going on inside it. And I'm not sure I can do this in a seated position, so I'm going to stand up. It is what they call a black and gilt Chinese lacquered sewing box. And it dates from the 19th century, so probably the early 19th century. But when we open this up, you see our number, of course. The kids are very good about that. And another fabulous mirror that could be removed and put on your dressing table. And then an incredible array of mother of pearl and ivory pieces. Here are thread reels that you can wind your thread on. Here are clamps, also with a thread reel at the top for your work. Here are little bodkins for pulling your ribbons through. And then these little compartments open up to reveal other areas. This area here is for sliding in other small implements. Some wonderful little, I don't want to break them, so little cases, a pin cushion here, and some more thread reels here. And then this also, I believe, comes out carefully. It's probably easier to do without gloves on. Showing you where it sits in. There's a little area there for papers and other things. And then down below, the front opens out. This bottom area that we've pulled out, we actually had to use a little key to pull it through here, is a writing desk. And this pulls up, and you can make it into your lap desk. You can have little letters and things underneath it. You can pull the whole thing out and sit at a desk, have it on your lap. There's space here to put pens, pencils, and then other, maybe your ink, maybe your stamps, or however you were working at that point in time. This is a marvelously ingenious little box in which a woman could keep all of her special things, her sewing implements, her writing implements, and also any special correspondence that she needed to have. I wonder who TF was, whose initials are here. Would love to have met that person and seen what the rest of their house looked like. Okay, we're going to move on now to a Tunbridge box, and this is sort of a tourist piece. Tunbridge is a type of woodwork in which a lot of inlay is done. So there's mosaic inlay. And the castle that is on this is Edridge Castle, which unfortunately was demolished in 1937. This piece was made in England circa 1800, probably shortly after the time the castle was rebuilt by the second Earl of Abergavenny. In the then fashionable Gothic revival style. James Watt was the architect, and he was one of the leaders of the Gothic revival movement. And then once this castle was remodeled, it became a popular destination for high society, particularly for those interested in shooting activities. The Prince of Wales, in the 19th century, was a regular visitor, as was Benjamin Disraeli, who was, of course, a Prime Minister of England. The castle was located not far from Royal Tunbridge Wells, England, which was a spa town in Kent during this time. And the decoration was something that a lot of the little workshops in that area did. So that's why it became known as Tunbridge Wear. And we have lots of pieces of Tunbridge Wear because when you went to that area, you would buy it as a souvenir to take home to your friends. And in the 19th century, British people were traveling a lot more because they had the railroad in order to get out to places like this. And the middle class, because of the Industrial Revolution, suddenly had a little bit of leisure time. And so they were also engaged in this activity as well. When you open this box, it reveals really beautiful, beautiful things. Look at that gorgeous silk work here at the top. And then these are thread spools with Tunbridge work on the ends. There's several of those here in slightly different patterns. This is also a thread winder in Tunbridge Wear. Several of those. There's a little thimble. This top, this of course is our number, making sure we know what it is and where it is. This opens to reveal a little storage area in which there are some pieces that may or may not have been from the time period, so we're just going to leave those be. Little pincushion here. This area also opens up. And then this piece, I believe, as well, pops out, and there's a little secret storage space underneath with a little copy of a needlework book that came with the piece when it came to the museum. Really beautiful work and a wonderful souvenir piece. Wouldn't you love to be able to get this when you go to Las Vegas on holiday? Moving on, I want to show you next then the straw work sewing box. Now, straw work is done by using straw that has been colored with different colors to create a design, and also the different way in which the straw is laid out. And you can see that it's not only on the top, but you can also see that the straw work has been done on the sides. Is that? And then when we open it up, it has some really cool stuff. Look at all this straw work inside. Beautiful, beautiful pansies on this, or violets. I'm not sure what you want to call that. Depends on your point of view, I think. This center part has wonderful musical instruments. And you can see that there are many pieces in here that were part of this. This is a tatting shuttle, a bodkin, some styluses, another ribbon threader. I want to point this out just a little bit because you can see perhaps the hole in that. And that was very important to women who had to have all sorts of ribbons to hold together their corsets and hold their garters, their stockings up at that time. So a ribbon threader was very important. Look at also the beautiful work that's done in here on the sides of the box. And again, a mirror, just an exquisite piece, a little tiny one that could be taken with you very easily. And we'll talk about some of these other implements when we see them. We'll see them, other implements similar to that later. And then finally, in my opinion, is the piece de resistance with our boxes. And this is a Stump Work Box or Stump Work casket. This particular piece is fairly early. It dates from circa 1680. Yeah, that's 1680. Many, many years before Washington's time, for instance. On it, on the cover of the top of it is a gentleman and a woman. She is holding a lute. It was very appropriate for women to play a lute at the time because they didn't have to raise their arms in order to play it. And so for that reason, they could play it and not be too risque. Women were not supposed to show their elbows, which is why women at the time were not encouraged to play violins, but rather pianos, harpsichords, lutes were all acceptable things. You can see again on this, it looks to me like a love scene, a gentleman courting a woman in a garden scene. You can see the wonderful stump work that's here on some of the raised pieces. There's a lot of metallic work going on this piece. I'm going to turn it around just because my favorite side is, of course, is the back side, where there's a beautiful tulip. So let's open this little gem and see what's inside. Before I do that, I just want to mention one more time, all of this work in here is silver thread that has been laid over a blue silk fabric. And it is obviously deteriorating a little bit, but no, I think it looks pretty good for its age. And then opening this, we come to a beautiful little silk covered interior that lifts out. This is the piece this is the leg that is making it be a little bit unstable. We'd love to get it to a conservator at some point. And there we go. Oh my goodness. Look at this beautiful interior. Remember, in 1680, mirrors were almost non-existent. So this interior not only has this beautiful surprise scene for you, but it also is lined with mirrors. You can see on all four sides. This image and the interior of this is just exquisite and would only have been seen really by the woman who worked with it or held it, unless she showed it to her friends, as she might, to show off the beautiful mirrors. It almost looks like it is Adam and Eve being banished from Eden, with the angels being the ones that are the extra characters in there. But I'm not sure, I haven't studied it properly to know that for sure. But if it is, what more of a wonderful reminder to a woman to behave herself. The next thing that we're going to go on to are knotting shuttles. And knotting shuttles are like giant tatting shuttles. You can see how large they are in my hands. They range from about 3 inches wide, long to 7 inches long. They are open at the ends. Tatting shuttles, however, are closed at the ends and actually very sharp. These are more rounded and they don't hurt you nearly as much if you happen to poke your finger on them. This particular one, let me turn it around. I'm sorry, I had it upside down. This is actually gold. There was some discussion in our department. The students were calling it copper. Oh, you want that copper one? And I said, no, I think the appraiser thought it was gold, and we took it to the jewelers in town, to J. Keith, and yes, indeed, it is 14 karat gold, of course, on another metal. Knotting was a very popular pastime in the 18th century among women of the court and the upper classes. And what they would do with this is they would create a string of thread that had knots on it that looked very much like pearls. So it's just knots which would give dimension that they would add to the edge of embroidery, either on their own clothing or maybe on bed hangings. This is a fad that went out of fashion in the 19th century when everyone started wearing those white muslin dresses that didn't have heavy embroidery on them compared to the 18th century coats and dresses. The other really fun thing about it, well, several things. First of all, it was done by the upper classes, not the lower classes, and it was a very social object, and so thus we have a gold one. All of the things you're going to see today are made of rather precious materials or had interesting things happen with them. This particular one has the initial DL on one side, and then, oops, I'm sorry, on the other side are the initials NMP, and it was made in England, and it would have been used to make those knots. The other interesting thing, if you're a needleworker, you know that you need good light. You didn't need good light for this, and that was part of what was going on in the 18th century. They had candlelight or daylight, so this sort of work could be done in low levels of light. It didn't require any counting, any concentration, and so women definitely could do it in a social setting. So here's our one piece that is 14 karat gold, and then this one is an enamel work shuttle, also with some inlaid with gold floral and scroll motifs on the inside. I don't know if you can see those. The top part here, this enamel work, hopefully you can see the waviness of the gold. This is called gouache work, and basically it's created by using a metal turning to create very small geometric patterns, and then it's enameled over top of that. We have several pieces that you're going to see today, some that are no more that are knotting shuttles, but we have some needle cases and other things that have that same sort of gouache work on it. And this is really beautiful because it's not only gorgeous on the top, but also on the sides as you turn it. Another beautiful one is this enamel wear one, and it has, I'm hoping that we can get in real close to see there are two different images on it. On the one side, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one is up to you right now, but on one side, in French, roughly translated, it says, "In love with companion." And on the other side, this is the one with, "In love with companion." And on the other side is Cupid with a dog on a lead. And that one translates, "In love the finest are taken." It's from France in the 19th century, the beginning of the 19th century, 1800, and the little work on it is just marvelous. I'm sorry that my French isn't better to actually say it to you in French, but the other thing about these is they were often given as tokens of love by men in a woman's life, not necessarily her husband, but it could have been her husband. Speaking of husbands, these pieces were collected by Helen Graf, and Helen, right before she got married to Dave Graf, this one is very special. In fact, he wanted to hold on to it. This has that gouache work on it. It is French. I'm sorry. Yes, we think it's French with rose-cut diamonds on it. It has an R on one side with rose-cut diamonds around the edge, and then an F on the other. I wish I knew who this person was. But Dave, Helen's husband, said to me, "You know, this is the first one that Helen bought when we were about to get married." And she said to me, "You know, I've been collecting knotting shuttles. I want to buy this one, but do you mind? It's a little expensive." And he said, "Helen, it's your money to spend as you want. I know every one of you wants to go find Dave Graff and marry him, but that's not going to happen, I don't think. And I'm not going to give you his address, so there you go." But this is a piece she bought, and it does have rose-cut diamonds all around it. It's absolutely exquisite and gorgeous, and this is the only piece that is actually on loan for this exhibition. Moving along, I want to show you this ivory depth carved filigree knotting shuttle that came in its own sharkskin covered case. This is also from the 18th century, and when I open it up, you can see how perfectly it fits in the case, and hopefully against the blue you can see the different motifs, and they're different on each side. And this one still has some thread on it for knotting, some silk thread for knotting on it. This one actually has, on this side, I'm sorry, I had it upside down. I think this is coat of arms on this particular side. Exquisite work. Took a long time to make it. I'm sure she was very proud to use it and kept it in her case, in its case. This one is a paper mache one, but the decoration on it I think is just exquisite. Can you see the birds and the sort of the wheel in the center? And it's different on both sides. So I'm going to let you look at this for a second. Then I'm going to turn it over so you can see the other side. Just beautiful, exquisite work. And then this last one I want to show you has what they call a Verna Smarten finish on it, which was developed in the 18th century in France and used to decorate personal items and furniture. This has some birds on it in an outdoor setting. It's a little difficult to see, so that's why I think seeing it on the screen is really marvelous. The interior of it is, you can see the finished wood there. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to show you the side that didn't have the number on it. There you go. And then the other side has slightly different birds on it. I looked at it several times to make sure. By the way, all of these will be in the exhibition catalog, and so you'll be able to see these up close and personal. And we're working on getting that to the design. The designer has it, getting it to the printer, and hopefully we'll have it online when the exhibit opens. Now I want to move on to chatelaines, which were things that were used to sort of keep everything at your waist during the 18th and then later in the 19th century. Certainly when they were wearing the empire dresses, they weren't using chatelaines, but later on when the dresses returned to having waistlines, they definitely did go back to using chatelaines because they were a great way to carry a lot of things. This little area here would have hung on your belt, and this little chatelaine held lots of things. And there's some discussion if you look at the advertisements from the time that these were out. The whole thing was really called a chatelaine, but you could also buy the center section and then buy the attachments in many ways similar to the way we would buy charms for charm bracelets today. So this chatelaine is mother of pearl and gold. And this would have been the scissors holder. It doesn't have a pair of scissors in it, but you can see that it would have fit perfectly in there. This was a needle case that also opens for needles, or it could have been also for very tiny crochet hooks. And then these other ones were for things like waxers, probably a thimble in here. And I hope you can see the exquisite work on this mother of pearl on here. Smelling salts were another thing that sometimes women had, or scent. Remember, they didn't bathe as often as we do, and so the fragrances in the 18th century may not have been the ones that you really want to have around you, so thus it would have been wise to have some sort of smelling salt or scent. This is a pin style chatelaine made in the 19th century. When I turn it over, you can see that it has a pin. So it could have been worn in many places on the garment, didn't have to have a belt. And you can see that it has been separated from two of its appendages, or chatelettes. This particular one has a very definite musical theme to it. You can see here the cherub holding the lute, or some other stringed instrument. I may be wrong about that, if there are musicians in the community fussing at me. This particular piece here, when I hold it up, you can see that it also, I believe, has musical instruments on it. And it's slid to the side so that these are actual papers that you could write notes on. So it's quite possible that one of the missing appendages was a little pencil or pen. And then this piece here has a wonderful, it's beautiful, but then on the other side are initials, and they are E with a D in the middle and G monogrammed. So obviously it was a special piece for someone. And then this piece, I'm almost certain, is a needle case that opened. It slid off, and your needles were held inside. You can see that it has a little cherub's face on it. So another symbol of love, perhaps. But this is just an example of some of the chatelaine pieces. So when you come and see them on exhibit and you're wondering what the things are, in general, you're going to find a needle case, you're going to find a thimble case, you're going to find perhaps a scissors holder. So maybe there were scissors on here that could have been used elsewhere. You might find a writing sort of surface, but those are some of the general things that you find on chatelaines. And then they changed and went to other pieces, having other pieces as well. Okay, we're going to shift now from chatelaines onto another type of needlework tool. Etoiles were a small group of sewing utensils that you could carry with you. They're like little tiny needlework toolboxes. We think that they may also have been given as tokens of love and or also as prizes for needlework that you had done. This one is just exquisite. It is a brass étoi in the shape of a beehive skep, with a polished alabaster base, and there's a bee. You can see there's a bee here on the very top, and then there's a little bee entering down here below, entering the skep, and as the top opens and it reveals a little stiletto. Can you see that stiletto? There's a thimble here. There are little itty bitty scissors. Now, I would suggest to you that those blades are definitely TSA approved. And then there's a little needle case here whose top is missing. But look at the exquisite work. Oh, no, it's not missing. It's just sitting over here. I'm sorry. Well, Julia Child would have done it that way. This is a ribbon threader. You can see the little hole there for ribbon, or you could call it a bodkin. Isn't this a beautiful, exquisite piece? Just lovely. Now let me put it back together, and we'll move on to the next piece. I'm just going to set this aside. How about we do that? So Jane doesn't get upset. This next one, oh dear. This next one is a little fish, and it opens to reveal scissors, a little longer, another stiletto, needle case, and a thimble. Just a wonderful little compact piece that you could carry in your pocket very easily. This walnut-shaped one has even smaller pieces to it, which is one of the reasons we sort of think that they might have been prizes. This one opens up to reveal a silver cover here. There is a thimble holder. There's a thimble holder here. There's scissors. Again, little TSA approved pieces. A bodkin. This one has a little scent jar here. Needle case and stiletto. This one is a little more, a little less expensive when it was purchased, but sort of an indication that it might have been purchased as a gift of love with the heart shape, with a wonderful pair of scissors that has a wonderful little, has wonderful Art Nouveau decoration to it. A thimble, and then this is an emery with a silver end on it. These strawberries, which many of us have seen over the years on the tomato pincushions, are filled with little metal shavings, and those metal shavings are designed for you to run your needle through it or your pen to remove any rust that might have accumulated on it, and that's what an emery does. So wonderful little needlework case here, little etui. And then this last one is really very remarkable. It is in the shape of a pistol. And you might wonder, of course, it might seem very appropriate at Texas Tech with the whole guns up thing to have a pistol like this. It's a little metal, probably a nickel. I think the end of it here might have held a pincushion at one point in time that has fallen loose. But when you open it up, when you open the trigger, it opens up to reveal a mirror. And then you can see the thimble. We're going to just have everything sort of fall out so you can see it more easily. So there is a set of scissors which really are curved to fit into this little etui, but they do work. And a thimble. And this is a needle case which opens for needles. And then this is a thread winder. Thread winders, you've seen some of these thread winders in the little needlework toolboxes, and they were because thread did not come in the skeins, it did not come on rolls like we have it today on the spools until much later. And you would get a hunk of thread, and it was easier if you could wind it onto a winder and then have it ready when you were ready to use it. So this is what an etui is. All right, we're moving on now to needle cases. Needles were very expensive, handmade needles. We didn't have all the technology early on, and so, and also even today, a person doing needlework often has a favorite needle that they like to use and want to keep track of. This particular one is a cobalt blue Gilt enamel cylinder, and it has the image of Tsar Nicholas on one side, and then on the other side is the Tsarina, his wife. You can see that I hope you can see the blue enamel, that little the design, the geometric design on it. And then the top of it, it's set with a moonstone, okay? And then it unscrews like this. So this is one of the reasons we wanted to show you things today, because you won't be able to see all of this sort of thing in the exhibition when we have to put things in. It does have interesting markings, and this one in particular is set in diamonds on this side. So this is probably from Russia, made between 1907 and the Revolution in 1917. Over here is, in England in the 1870s, there was a company named W. Avery and Son, and they created a lot of brass needle holders, needle cases, and they also were designed to fit their particular needles. Now this B opens up, and you can see in here that there was a place where you could put needles, but also down here below there were places where packets of needles could just sit in there on the wings. And the Avery Company also made needles that they then made needles and put in packets that would fit this this ensemble, this wonderful little bee. And there are others like that. This particular one is a hedgehog. And these were made in Redditch, England, about in the 1870s. This hedgehog really looks more to me like he might have been used. Can you see him? We have him right there. I'm almost wondering whether he might have also been for hat pins, because his holes are so large. We have a couple that we're not sure if they were really pin cushions, needle cases, or hat pins cases, but isn't he kind of fun? And then we have some, we have two, let's not have those roll off. We have two butterflies that were made by Avery and Sons, and you can see how they sit. And then when you put the wings back, you can see where the cases actually would sit. And in this one in particular, you can see, and actually this one too, then you can, let me show you this. You can see the needle case. And can you see in here that there's an 8 and there's a 9 embossed in the actual brass? And those were the sizes of the needles. Those of you that aren't familiar with needles, needles get smaller the higher the number. So a size 12, which a lot of quilters were quilting, hand quilting with, would get you exquisite tiny stitches. And so this was an 8 and this was a 9. And I think on this side, yeah, you can see the 6 and the 7 on this side. So these were fun little butterfly needle cases that you would put on your sewing area to hold and to have. This one is another Avery piece from the 1870s. It's intended to look like Shakespeare's house. That's what it's called, Shakespeare's house piece. The top opens and the front pulls down. I'm not exactly sure what happened with this, but it does have little drawers that pull out. And I'm sorry, I have to take off the glove to do that. Hands were exquisite, were washed carefully this morning. It has little drawers that pull out. All 3 of these drawers pull out for your needles. And it's much more difficult to show a piece like this in an exhibit than it is here, where you can see all the embossing work on it and how the piece actually works with its little chimney. Put it back together. Another Avery piece is this easel. Let's see if we can do it with the gloves on. The picture, you can see the picture has a little embossing there on the front of florals, and it opens out, the easel opens out, and you can see the little packages for needles. You can see where those packages would have set right in on that. And then our last Avery piece today that I'm going to show you is a scallop-shaped piece. And it opens to the side, and you can see packages for the needle case, the needles in the cases here. Now, individual needles would be stored in things like this wonderful ivory piece. This is from the Dieppe region of France. It's probably a fisherwoman. And we have several of these in the collection, cut of ivory in the Dieppe region of France, and she comes apart, and the needle is stored in here, in the bottom of the torso. And the Black Forest was not to be outdone when it came to making needle cases. We have several, and the students thought we'd show you these two. This particular one with its label still on it, can you see the squirrel at the top? And he pops off. Actually, it comes apart at the middle, like that. And then, okay, my knowledge is not as good as it should be. I'm not sure if it's an alligator or crocodile. I know I should have looked it up and know the difference, but we're taping this a week earlier than we normally would have. And he was also carved in the Black Forest, and he comes apart in the middle to hold your needles. One of the needle cases that the students really liked and wanted to make sure I included today is this ivory snow pea pod. I'm sorry, let me try to put it so you can actually see it better. Let's get the number away from you. And when you open him up, it pulls apart here to store the needles. And I'm not going to force him today. Trust me, he opens. This one is a fun piece. It's a Victorian needle case, and it's a needle case sewing, and it's made of fabric and ribbon. And you see the man on the top piece there, and then each of the sides of the case have different images. You're actually seeing this better than we could portray it in the exhibit catalog. A very Tudor-looking house. Makes you think of England. And then it does a really marvelous little thing. When you pull the top off, it opens out to have all sorts of needle pieces in it. A little box here, maybe for your thimble. And look at the wonderful pictures here. These are all needles from Abel Marles, or they're Flora MacDonald quality needles. So it's a real feeling that it has a lot of English going on with it. It was made circa 1880. Isn't that a fun piece? I'm missing all your oohs and ahs in the room when this sort of thing pops open. But it's best that we're all being safe. And besides, our friends in further regions can see these materials today. That's how he opens. And then one last needle case for the moment that I want to show you is this little beaded work piece. It has the initials LL and 1840. We're getting that in close so you can see that. We think it's made by Lydia Pinkham in 1840, and it opens for you to put your pins and needles in, as well as other sorts of little sewing equipment. This is obviously our number of that object, and that's how she closes. And then one more needle case I want to show you. This is what we're calling tartan wear, and there were a lot of Scottish souvenirs in various tartans, because tartans became very popular in the 19th century, and every clan had invented its own tartan. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but they really did in the 19th century invent them for their own clan and call them by what they wanted to call them. And I love tartans and love studying them. And as you might imagine, Montgomery, we do have our own tartan. You can see on the inside of this particular case that all of the needles are numbered. You can see the numbers on the top and on the other side. And I just thought it'd be fun to show you that little tartan wear piece. Okay. Before we move on, I want to shift to another object, which is still a needle case, but the students pulled it as something slightly different. These are needle cases. They're carved ivory, but they're also called stanhopes. The students called them stanhopes because they have a stanhope at the end. This particular one, the red ivory parasol one, opens here, and you can put your needles in the umbrella part, as does the white one, in the same exact way. But this part at the very top, which we really can't show you at all, you can see that there's a little hole here in the top of the handle. That's called a stanhope, and many needlework tools had stanhopes in them. This particular one features views of Amsterdam. It was made in England in about the 1870s, and so if you couldn't travel to Amsterdam, you could certainly share the views with your friends. And then this one also opens the same way, and it's stanhope. is of Brighton, England, so a beach, a resort area for you to see. This particular piece, we're moving on now to thimble holders. This piece, you can see that there's a little hole there, a little ring there at the top. So it's our opinion that it was probably part of a chatelaine at one point. Look at the wonderful, gorgeous sterling silver work on this piece. And it opens to reveal that it is a thimble case. And we're going to look at thimble holders now. This one is very exquisite because you can see that there's a space here, the big space for the thimble. And then you see these curved little areas. That was for needles. And then can you see these tiny little holes on the outside? Those were for straight pins, and there's still some straight pins sitting in there. Isn't this just a marvelous little thimble holder? Now, thimble holders go from the beautiful, exquisite sterling silver here to the really fun pieces. This is one that the students said we just had to show today. This is a little owl. Can you see him? He's sort of a cross between an etoile and a thimble holder. So there are some things that fall into both areas. And he is a celluloid piece from the early 20th century. The thimble, his hat unscrews to form a thimble. And then inside is our needle our thread winders and a little needle case. And this one still has a needle in it. So and this is a 20th century one, whereas of course the first silver one was probably from the 19th century. He's kind of a cutie the way he goes back together. This is a lovely piece. It's a silver and set with gems, set with stones of some sort, and it opens in this way to hold the thimble. Thimbles were also sometimes made of glass, and thimbles holders were made of glass. This is one that would sit very nicely on your sewing table, and then the thimble was held here in the center. This one could have been part of a chatelaine, but because it has a chain, but I think probably it wasn't originally intended as a chatelaine piece. Can you see it's of brass and silver? And it has those beautiful floral motifs embossed on it. And it opened here to reveal the thimble, which we also have sitting. We took it out because it is silver, made by Simon Brothers, which was a thimble making company here in the United States. They also made jewelry. So fine thimbles made of silver were made by Simon Brothers, and this was one of theirs. And that's how that goes together. This guy is a cute little one. A little rabbit sitting on a brass egg-shaped thimble holder, which opens. It's difficult to open these with gloves, as you might imagine, but there's the little thimble inside. This penguin piece is another favorite of the students. You can see how tiny it is, and when you unscrew his body, he opens up to reveal a thimble that I don't know if only a doll could use it. I can't imagine anyone who actually could hold a needle could get a thimble on their finger that size. But isn't he adorable? And wouldn't he have been a fun little prize for needlework? For needlework. This one is a Mechlin work. Mechlin work is a sort of woodwork. It was another one of those. We saw Tunbridge work earlier in that box, and we've seen some of the tartan wear. This is another aspect of souvenir wear, and this was a thimble holder that sat in underneath this dome. Another popular piece from Scotland in the 19th century. And here is a strawberry-shaped thimble holder. Made circa 1900, and there's a hinge on it, and it opens in this way to reveal a case for the thimble. We're going to move on now to clamps. Clamps were very important when you were doing needlework because you needed the ability to have a third hand to hold things for you. And this particular one, okay, here it goes. This is a dog that would have sat on the edge of your table. It has a little pin cushion going on here, and the mouth opens to hold the fabric. So when you press the lever down, And you see that the mouth is opening there, and then you'd release it and hold that fabric in place, and you could use two hands to do the rest of the work you needed to do. This is a rather unusual one. We don't usually see dogs in this shape used for this purpose. We have one that is a bird clamp, which we see much more commonly. We'll look at the wonderful detail in the embossing of this piece. And then there are also wonderful, beautiful apricot velvet apricot colored pin cushions, and the beak of the bird opens to hold. A wooden clamp, it's going to be a little difficult to show you in the case, has another pin cushion at the top, painted wood, and it dates from the 19th century, and on the other side is a mirror. I'm not sure which side we're going to show you in the case or how we're going to quite do this, but it'll be fun to show these pieces. And then this is a piece we weren't quite sure. We think it could be from Spain. It also has a pincushion on it. You can see the painted work on it, some decoration on the top. Here's a house. And then this little top part is a tape measure, which rewinds with the knob. Kind of a fun little thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about tape measures in a little bit when we see a whole complement of them. And then another clamp, two other clamps that came into the collection that I kind of wonder why they're sitting with Needlework Tools, but they were just too cool not to show you. Now these are Stork Clamps, and the mouth opens. You can see how that opens, and the edge is very sharp and very rather serrated, and you can see in this particular one that I'm holding, when we open the cavity, right here you can see a baby in the cavity. And these were actually clamps that apparently were used to cut the umbilical cord before the placenta was removed during a birth. And there's a story that sometimes this particular one could stand. This one doesn't have a baby in it. It's just plain. But this one could stand, and there is some thought that families would put these on a mantle so people would know the family member was pregnant without having to make a formal announcement or say anything. And you can see on this one a little bit better than the other one, perhaps, the serrated edges that made it a very good clamp for that purpose. You can see on the screen the way that Tatting Shuttles created beautiful pieces of lace. A tatting shuttle facilitates tatting by holding a length of thread so that it can be guided through those loops. And they're usually very pointed. This particular one comes in this lovely leather case along with other implements. It could be called an etui, but you can see this little tatting shuttle right here. It's a bone tatting shuttle, and it was probably made in the 19th century. It has other pieces like a bodkin and a beautiful blue silk lining. Another tatting shuttle, and there will be many in the exhibition, but there were these two that I wanted to point out to you. Another tatting shuttle is a promotional piece. You can see here how the ends of the tatting shuttles are different from the knotting shuttles. And also, if you remember, I was holding the other knotting shuttles. They were much larger. These are usually at most 3 inches, and in fact, we have one that's about 1 inch in length. This particular one is I'm going to just lay it down. Hopefully that's okay. I can tilt it if you want. Would that be easier to see? Is that better? Okay. This particular one is a tatting shuttle for Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. Now, Lydia Pinkham is pictured on the other side of this, and you can see her right there. She sort of has a grandmotherly look to her, if I could get her to lay straight. There you go. And you're going to see some pictures of her on the screen when we edit all of this. Lydia Pinkham was sort of an herbalist at the end of the 19th century in Liens, Massachusetts. Any of you that have watched Outlander, you know that Claire's always out there getting herbs to take care of her patients. And Lydia Pinkham was one of those women that did that. Now, at the same time that she was doing this, she was marketing her vegetable compound for women who had severe menstrual cramps and other issues with menopause, and other issues with their cycles. And at the same time, the medical community said that if you had severe menstrual cramps, you should have your ovaries removed. So obviously people would more often want to go ahead and take Lydia Pinkham's compound. Now her compound continued to be used, and in a sense it was women versus the medical establishment through what she was doing and some others at the same time. It was found out, however, when we came to the point that we were actually doing honesty in packaging, that we realized how much alcohol was in her product. It was taken out, and it was continued to be used. Now that was taken out about 1906 with the Pure Food and Drug Act. It's interesting how different laws and different activities affect various things. But this particular piece tells that story of Lydia Pinkham with her image, and women were using it for quite a long period of time. They did remove a lot of the alcohol after the Pure Food and Drug Act went into effect in 1906, and in fact her formula was purchased by Cooper Laboratories, headquartered in California. So well into the 21st century, pills and liquids based on her original vegetable compound were still available to pharmacies. Moving on from tatting shuttles, I wanted to show you this beautiful thread winder. Thread winders, as we mentioned before, were used to take thread off of big skeins, wind them on here so that they were easier to use and to sew with. And if you look carefully, let me turn this right, can you see at the upper edge here, these are really dragons. One faced this way, one faced that way. And it's a beautiful ivory, I'm sorry, it's mother of pearl thread winder. So moving on to pin cushions and pin discs, pins began to be made in the 14th century, and they were made by hand at first, and so obviously they would have been very expensive at that time, and so people tried their best to keep them safe. This is a pierced ivory shield-shaped pin disc. You can see that it's held together with red thread that goes through, and the pins were put on the edge here in that red velvet area. It dates from about 1880, and it's just an exquisite piece. The piercing is on both sides. We have several pin discs in the collection, and I just wanted to mention them and point them out because you might see these round things and go, oh, well, that's a tape measure. This is an ivory, this is one with a flower on it. You can still see how the pins were used in it. And pin cushions go from these small little types of pieces to something very exquisite and extravagant in this particular piece. This is a pin cushion on top, as you can see, with a wonderful little cherub with a raised hand, raised arm. And the interior are spools for putting thread. So you put your thread spools in here, and then you can see the holes on the side. Your thread would come out there. And so you would put your lid back on, and everything was in good shape. If we look carefully around this edge, you can see buildings that have been engraved. This is just an exquisite silver piece, just a marvelous piece, one of my favorites. And there's a little drawer here at the bottom that pulls out for scissors, other things. This particular piece dates from, the 19th century, as you might imagine, and it's just a marvelous pin cushion, spool holder, and other little places to keep things. Many of you have seen elephant pin cushions. This one dates from the 19th century. It's complete with ivory tusks, which we of course would not do any longer because we know of the damage to the elephant herds from people trying to harvest those tusks. A pin cushion that's a little more recent, but one that the students thought we needed to show, is this lamb pin cushion. This one dates really from about the 1980s. I'll set him down so I'm not holding his ears. And pin cushions can get even smaller, as we can see with this wonderful little frog pin cushion, which is another favorite of the students. You can see how he's grasping that olive colored covered pin cushion. Just a cute little bug there, little guy. And obviously it's not a bug. I'll be in trouble with the mammologist if I keep that up. Another pin cushion that is really exquisite is this silk covered owl that's been marked with ink, permanent ink. It is just gorgeous. You can see the detail on it. Cute little guy. The rest of the pincushions I'm going to show you are a little more recent. This is one that the students just really, really loved and said that I had to show it to you. This cat is not looking very friendly, in my opinion, with its tail up like that. It's cold cast metal, and the pincushion is obviously in the top there, so it's a little metal piece. You can hear that noise. Then we have two pincushions that were used by Mabel Irwin. Now, Mabel Irwin was a very important person here at Texas Tech. She wrote Design for Moderns, and it was a clothing text that was used in the clothing department of universities across the country for many, many years. In fact, there were 2 editions of it that she did, and she was a major friend, a significant friend of the museum, particularly of the Clothing and Textile division. This little pink poodle with the pink eyes and the pink cushion, actually it sort of vibrates and moves. The tail moves and the head moves also. Little bobble there. One of the students' absolute favorite that they absolutely insisted I had to show you was also owned by Mabel Irwin, and this is a pincushion that is a Google Eye. It's on springs, so it moves. Can you see that its legs are springs? And it has Google Eyes. The students call it the Google Eye pincushion, and it is their absolute favorite. It makes them all laugh and smile. And why wouldn't it? I mean, after all, why not have fun with your little needlework tools? And then a souvenir pincushion from San Antonio, so Texas, on a cow's hoof. And it is marked, I think you can see, it says San Antonio on it. So it's a tourist piece. You can imagine, particularly Northerners driving through, visiting, buying something like this. And then there is another sort of pincushion that can be made by creating the bottom, which is a cushion that you where you stick your pins. But this porcelain piece is something that you purchased. This is how it looks, and this is how these porcelain pieces look before they're used in the pincushion. We have several of these. I don't know why we have several. Maybe it was something that it was a fad to make your own pincushion with these various shapes. I don't know the answer to that. Surely some of the older attendees at the usual come-and-sees might have been able to weigh in on this. But here are the pincushions that we have. Tape measures evolved as measuring devices did. Some of the earliest measurements were decided by the guilds in the town before standardized measurements occurred. Early measurements were also in nails until we went to inches and centimeters. This is a water wheel tape measure. You can see that it comes out, it's in inches and centimeters on the other side. And it will hold out, there's a spring action on it, but to rewind it, you rewind it here with the water wheel. So you can see it pulls out with the wheel moving, and then it winds back up that way as well. Another interesting shape in tape measures is this fun sailboat. Painted on the bottom red with wonderful 3 masts on the ship, and the tape comes out of the back. And it is in inches and centimeters. One of my favorites, because of all the rabbits here in Lubbock, is this wonderful rabbit tape measure. He's a little hard to photograph. You can see his eyes, his side, and his tape comes out here. One of the favorites of our students is this great little turtle guy. And the tape measure comes out of the head and rewinds that way as well. And on the bottom of him, or somewhere on him, actually on here, the students have been able to determine that it says, "Pull my head but not my leg," on his shell. The legs and the underside of the turtle are of a different, this is a silver and this is a different type of material. And you can see how they designed the underside of the turtle to really represent sort of a box turtle that we're so familiar with. But he is one of the favorites in the department because the head is the part where the tape measure comes out. Another tape measure is this tortoise and hare little piece. Beautiful work on the sides. which it will be difficult to show you all of the beauty of this particular piece. And you can see on the top, the tortoise and hare are in one arrangement, and on the bottom, they're in a different arrangement. And the tape comes out of the side here with a little D-ring on it. And it rewinds here at the top with the knob. Another tape measure is, of which we have actually a couple in the collection, is this Coronation Coach. And the tape comes out of the side here, and then it rewinds with using the top of the coach to do that. It has little figures at the front and back of the coach, and then this particular set has a wonderful little set of horses pulling the carriage. A fun thing to have on your sewing table, I think. So let's move on now to thimbles. Thimbles are used by some people and not used by other people. Thimbles are worn on the third finger of the hand, and the way you test a thimble to see if it fits your finger is to put it on and shake it upside down, and if it doesn't fall off, it is the right size for you. Many needleworkers and many young people do not use thimbles today, but it is an essential tool if you're trying to stitch by hand through something that's stiff, like leather or several layers of tightly woven fabric. This particular one has a sapphire set in the end. Move that away so you can see that better. And some beautiful ornate work on the bottom. This next one is a domestic company thimble, so it's a promotional thimble. We also have a thimble which I didn't bring today to show you, but we will have it in the exhibit, a promotional thimble that has Lubbock on it, and you can maybe see here on the edge down here along the bottom that it says the domestic company, and it had rather an imposing headquarters in New York on Broadway at 14th Street in Manhattan, and they made sewing machines, and they were the supplier of the Minnesota line of sewing machines for Sears and Roebuck for a period of time in the 1910 period. They advertised to their country friends to come to their store, their building at 14th and Broadway in Manhattan, so that their country friends could see the city, view the city from the top floors of the building, which is kind of an interesting aside, I think. Thimbles, we mentioned a little earlier, were often made by people who were involved in the jewelry business. This particular thimble it's a brass thimble, but you can see on the side right here, there is a little cutter for thread. Very efficient, I think. Although I wonder how often you might have cut your thread that you didn't mean to cut when you were stitching through something. I'm not sure how that worked. Then we're going to show you on the screen the Elsa Williams School of Needlework. And these are two thimbles that were gotten by Pat Grapp when she attended that school in the late 70s, early 80s. I think you can see here on the bottom of the thimble where it says Elsa Wilson Needlework School. This particular one is set with emeralds in it, and it was something that was earned by Mrs. Grapp when she went to class there, and then this is one that she earned in the 1980s for attending that class. And then the last category we're going to look at are scissors, and you might go, well, a scissor is a scissor is a scissor, but, well, not necessarily when it comes to this. Look at this beautiful ornate brass pair of scissors in its case. This is actually a buttonhole cutter, so you can see the opening in there so you don't cut through all of the fabric. And look at these wonderful brass handles on this piece. It was made circa 1900 and is just an exquisite, gorgeous pair of scissors. Then scissors sometimes had other interesting factors going on with them. This particular pair, you can see, is designed to look like the outside of a church. And just works. It's that way on both sides of the piece. And this small embroidery set of scissors has like a gesture on it. If you can see him on the side there. Kind of a fun piece. This is a pair of shears that has the shape of an owl on it. And you can see the little red glass eyes on that owl. The back side doesn't have the glass eyes, but has the same shape. This is one that was in the collection. It's not from the Grapp collection, but this was originally set with stones here. And it actually, our piece, if you look carefully on the blades, you can see it says the St. Louis Exposition. And when you look at the slides that I prepared for you, you're also going to see another pair, not ours, but one that I found on the internet that had buildings from that exposition on it as well. And then we also had a picture of a scrimshaw or ivory bone scissors, and this is our set. Really exquisite, interesting, and beautiful scissors made of bone. In the 19th century, and ours have carved birds, as you can see on the handles. So the next slides that you're going to see are slides telling you about the dates for Come and See in 2021. So you'll have the dates for the fall, and those of you that are on the email should have those dates as well. And then there's also a slide that will show you the dates for the Sumptuous Stitches and Tiny Treasures. It is to open May 1st, but we really don't know, and you'll need to watch our website for that. We are not sure how long our exhibits team is going to be able to work in the building before they also are sent home. But as you're planning, we do plan, as we mentioned, to have the exhibit catalog online, and we're hoping for an opening reception on May 28th. You will be required to RSVP to the Museum Association for that. We're hoping to do a needlework workshop on the 19th and 20th of June, and then Lynn Bassett, a wonderful scholar from the Northeast, is going to come and talk to us about early American needlework on Thursday, September 17th. And that'll be an evening program at 6 o'clock, and an RSVP will be required for that as well. Those that have RSVPs are because we're having food, and we all know that Dwana, our Museum Association Executive Director, doesn't like anybody to go home hungry, so we like to have RSVPs for that. Thank you for being with us today, and if you have questions, you can always email me at marian.ann.montgomery@ttu.edu, and that email is also on our website. Thank you.